I've always been pretty good at math. I've loved numbers. Beginning a little over a decade ago, I began grade school in the Milwaukee area. I took the usual classes that most grade school students took, and I loved my math class. After each test, my math teacher would put the names of the people who got the top 5 scores on the board. For most people, this was something to be very happy about. You could see the fruits of your labor. But for me, even though my name was on the board a lot, it wasn't something I was very proud of. Each time my name was on the board, it cued another round of, "Oh, look, the black kid outscored all of us," type of comments from my friends and classmates. Or better yet, "Oh, you know, he's black, but if you looked at his report card, he's really white." I then went on to high school in the city of Milwaukee, a city which, according to census data, is the most segregated metropolitan area in the United States. It has been for a very long time. The city's crime rates and educational inequities clearly parallel the different experiences that people of different racial backgrounds have in the city. Going to school in a city where someone is shot and killed literally every other day makes me wonder where all the progress that we have always been talking about for the past generation has gone. In high school, I could count the number of African American students in my class just using my hands and toes. As each school year progressed, more and more of these students transferred out of one of Milwaukee's top high schools for various reasons. When I graduated, only a few of those initial students walked across the stage with me. When I went on to college, the same thing sort of happened. Many of my friends and classmates had either never been in the same town, let alone the same classroom, as a non-white student. Oftentimes, educational policy experts have tried to study and analyze the underachievement of blacks in education. Oftentimes, these experts point to things such as motivation, or confidence, or lack of preparation as key reasons for the underachievement. They'll say that black students are lazy and not motivated, and that there's really nothing we can do about it. But herein lies my first point. When discussing racial achievement in education, we oftentimes like to falsely believe that one's achievement is strictly determined by factors outside of race, such as class or socioeconomic status. This belief is manifested in many ways and goes along something like this. If you plop a black kid in a nice neighborhood with decent schools, he or she will do comparatively as well, if not better, than his or her non-black peers. This belief oftentimes leads black students like myself to hear the same mantra. Well, you know, if you suck it up and pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you'll be able to get past any sort of racial challenge you face in life. When you look at the long list of critically acclaimed African-American poets, scholars, entertainers, athletes, and even public officials, it can be very hard to argue this point. However, this notion that outside factors such as wealth, location, and opportunity suddenly outweigh the negative aspects brought about by someone's skin color couldn't be further from the truth. In 2013, I penned an op-ed in the Washington Post, my junior year of high school, and I discussed the conundrum of looking at race through a non-racial perspective. In my piece, I described the fact that oftentimes university admissions committees would look at me as some sort of golden gem, that gem being a black student who had decent grades, decent test scores, and acted and talked in a certain way that didn't fit a sort of box or a sort of stereotype. Suddenly, I had been thrust into America's debate over how far it's come in its diversity efforts, and how this country could be a country where people are not judged by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character. In my piece, I also described a double standard that I've been held to for most of my educational career. On one hand, I've always been told that I can achieve anything I want to academically if I just work hard enough and put a little bit of elbow grease into it. On the other hand, however, I've been told that if I do achieve any sort of success, that it was because I'm part of a quota or some sort of statistic, and that I didn't really own my success, that everyone else just handed it to me. Herein lies my second point. Stereotype threat and institutionalized discrimination exist not only for African Americans, but for any group of people in which a negative stereotype exists, and it drives our everyday decisions. Claude Steele is a social psychologist now at the University of California who is best known for his work on stereotype threat, a phenomenon that I think should get a lot more attention in higher education. Stereotype threat, as he defines it, is the threat of being viewed through the lens of a negative stereotype, or the fear that someone has of doing something that will confirm that stereotype. Stereotype threats exist for everyone, especially people who view themselves as the other in a group of people. Stereotype threats exist for all races, all classes, all genders. For example, the fear that I might have of not doing well on a test because of some sort of negative stereotype about people of color not excelling academically, that's a stereotype threat. The fear that a woman might have as she asks her male employer for a pay raise, that's a stereotype threat. The fear that a religious person might have of doing something that will confirm some sort of stereotype about their religion, that's a stereotype threat. Oftentimes, any of the groups that we associate with either have a negative stereotype loosely or closely attached to it. And because of that, we're afraid of confirming that stereotype. To avoid it, we change our everyday behaviors and our societal attitudes. Now, you might ask me, well, Negassi, obviously you've been able to tell us what stereotype threat is, and you're on stage. Why is this important? Herein lies the importance of it. Today, Black and African American university students face a unique challenge in trying to prove their legitimacy, as many have often failed to meet benchmarks of college success. In 1996, only 39% of Blacks and 46% of Hispanic students who enrolled in four-year colleges and universities earned their bachelor's degree within 6 years, while their white and Asian counterparts earned those same degrees at rates of 58% and 69%, respectively. Despite strong-willed diversity efforts by colleges since then, Blacks have made very little progress, inching up only 1% through 2005. In the 1990s, Steele and his research team decided to research the achievement of African Americans on standardized tests. They did this by administering extremely difficult GRE questions to college sophomores like myself. Steele and his research team found three important things. First, after adjusting the groups of students based on academic abilities and socioeconomic status, they noticed that achievement gaps persisted between Black students and white students across income levels, thus nullifying the argument that fixing socioeconomic gaps will suddenly eliminate racial discrimination in education. Secondly, Steele noticed something in the way he administered the test. When the test administrators stressed that the exam was a test of ability, Black students did noticeably worse than white students. However, on the same exact exam, when the test administrators said that the test was not a test of ability, Black students did just as well as white students. These first two events point to the existence of stereotype threat. However, it's Steele's third finding, which is probably the most important, especially for a student like myself. Steele and his research team noticed that stereotype threat affected the brightest, most motivated students the most. Suddenly, the idea of working hard enough and pulling yourself by the bootstraps to achieve your dreams has a bitter and dark truth to it. In Steele's research, the Black students internalized their external environments, and it depressed their scores significantly. Likewise, I fear that I'm confirming stereotypes of myself as I go through everyday life. I do a mental check, asking myself, hey, Negassi, are you confirming that negative stereotype about African Americans? I live with a sense of double consciousness, as the famed poet W.E.B. Du Bois puts it, where I'm not only conscious of how I view myself, but of how others view me. Now, I don't think that this grim reality must be our future. Herein lies my third point. Stereotype threats can be combated through a more innovative way of looking at race and our diversity efforts in colleges, universities, and workplaces. Now, oftentimes when we hear the words diversity, we think about achieving some sort of statistic or having a certain number of minorities in a certain situation. While integration is great, it's not really true diversity. For example, let me take you to my university's 2001 admissions packet. Now, UW-Madison couldn't find a black student at a football game, a staple event of the UW-Madison college experience. So to compensate for that, admissions officials photoshopped a picture of a black student, put it in the crowd, plastered it all over their admissions materials, creating a false image of how diverse the campus was. Spoiler, the campus wasn't very diverse. Now, obviously, the admissions officials had a well-intended goal of creating a welcoming environment for minorities. But in their methods, they clearly violated ethics, and they really did not have a good diversity effort in this case. These are not the sorts of diversity efforts we really need, and it stresses the importance of why we need more innovative ways. Note that in Steele's research, he was able to raise the scores of black students by simply getting them to believe that the tests that they were taking were racially fair and aware. This is very important for Steele, because he didn't have to lower the bar for minorities. He didn't have to change the questions on the exam. He simply had to identify the existence of stereotype threat and work to eliminate it, and to work to eliminate that fear that his brightest students had. Now, we really need to have this sort of innovative way of looking at race. If we don't realize the subconscious anxieties and fears of our brightest students, our diversity efforts will go nowhere. However, by identifying stereotype threats and the problems with using this negative lens, we can do a lot more. This can certainly be done on a personalized, individual level, but if we can make this go big, if this can be institutionalized, where different groups of people can establish a sense of racial trust between different schools, departments, and their employers, we can achieve much more. If achieving diversity is simply achieving a certain statistic, we will not achieve much. Rather, using this more collaborative effort, we can work to eliminate the existence of stereotype threats. Now, if we eliminate stereotype threats, we won't just conquer covert racism. We'll live in a world where a bright student doesn't have to fear seeing his or her name on the board after his or her success on a test, where bright students do not have to fear their own capabilities in light of their external environments. The famed philosopher Rousseau once said that man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains. I believe that we can break free of our chains and liberate ourselves from a conditioned way of living by eliminating covert racism through eliminating stereotype threats. And I believe that we can achieve much more than any generation before us. Thank you.